got some On today's Movie Talk, Benioff and Weiss are out of Star Wars. Then we've got Netflix testing playback speeds and Delta censoring the movie Booksmart, all on today's show. Good morning, everyone. We have a very, very interesting lineup today. Not the best news across the board, but we're going to have some great discussion on all of these stories with Vinnie and Coy. Let's get a quick rundown of the top stories in our call sheet. First up on the list is obviously the headline news this morning. Deadline is reporting that David Benioff and DB Weiss have exited their deal with Disney and Lucasfilm to create a Star Wars trilogy. The pair released this statement. We love Star Wars. When George Lucas built it, he built us too. Getting to talk about Star Wars with him and the current Star Wars team was the thrill of a lifetime, and we will always be indebted to the saga that changed everything. There are only so many hours in the day, and we felt we could not do justice to both Star Wars and our Netflix projects, so we regretfully are stepping away. All right, moving on to story number 2 now. News recently broke that Netflix has begun testing variable playback speeds in its Android app, which usually does signal the first step to the feature becoming available on all Netflix platforms. As reported by Variety, the feature allows viewers to play movies and TV shows at lower or greater speeds. More on this and what Judd Apatow in particular has to say about it later in the show. Next up now, in other content-altering news, I guess you would say, Delta passengers have noticed that elements of Caitlin Dever's character's journey in the movie Booksmart were edited out of the movie, specifically the elements that dealt with her character's queer identity. Olivia Wilde and her cast were not happy about this, and we're going to get into their thoughts in just a bit as well. Moving on, if you're looking for a little background information on the upcoming Obi-Wan series, here's an interesting little detail that Ewan McGregor shared with Coming Soon. It wasn't always going to be a series, not initially. When we first started talking about it, that wasn't really in the cards, but everything's changed so much so quickly. It's really exciting that it is now. I'm really into the idea to be able to tell the story over several hours instead of just one hit. I think it's going to be quite cool. Fingers crossed for that one. Now we've got one last call sheet item for you today. Briefly, we've got a quote from Infinity War and Endgame executive producer Trin Tran that offers up a loose timetable on when we might see another Endgame level event in the MCU. Here's what she told Cinema Blend. Over 10 years ago, it's always been our dream to get to Infinity War and Endgame level. We didn't know, obviously, where that was going to go at the start of the studio, but it's incredible to know that we were able to accomplish that. Now it'd be amazing if we could get to that level 10 years later. So I think it's a dream to continue doing that and build upon the MCU and the connective tissue that we have. You can check out the full quote on this on Collider.com. All right, guys, welcome to the doom and gloom panel of Movie Talk today.
Happy Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, they're just like kind of bummer stories, but we're going to have a really interesting conversation right now with Coy and Vinnie.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Hello. Happy to be here.
I wish I could have boosted your mood with
Just two
those
very
stories of
positive
positivity.
people.
I know.
We came here to talk about movies.
We got
and it's
really
like,
excited, and then we saw the rundown and
censorship
rest in
and
peace.
firing and
I had a
dystopia
good
and
Twitter
dystopia
once.
and
I enjoyed
technology.
Twitter.
The only bright side is that really all three of these stories are well worth discussing and, shape the future of the Star Wars film franchise and
Could be a
kind
slow
of
news day.
shape the future of content viewing in general, which is kind of crazy. But we got to kick it off with the big Star Wars news. When that headline dropped last night, I was absolutely shocked. Did this come as a surprise to you guys, especially after the end of Game of Thrones wasn't so well received?
Well, I mean, I think any news that drops at 9 Pacific time on a Monday night will be a surprise. I don't think anyone, with the gift of sitting on it for a little bit, no one's surprised. Because I think this was something that people were like, well, this might happen. And then they just kept digging their hole deeper. But I don't think I expected it to be like this. I didn't think I expected them to just be like, it's 9 o'clock on a Monday or midnight on the East Coast, and just ending this massive deal outright. I thought they'd like slowly phase them out, but it's just like, no, we're not making a Star Wars trilogy anymore.
I think I'd hit the point where I had convinced myself that if it was Benioff and Weiss and Rian Johnson's films were going to be the first to go. So I think I was just a little shocked that this news flat out came on their side of it.
I was surprised because when you sent me the rundown, I hadn't heard it because I was watching like Knives Out last night. I was watching a Rian Johnson film last night. I was in Rian Johnson's Knives Out, so ironically that's how. Yeah. So ironically, when I came out, I was like, oh, there's some Benioff and Weiss news. So I like didn't read into it because I thought I'd just check it this morning. So then I woke up this morning, I was like, oh, the news. I didn't.
News.
Oh, this really. So it was way bigger than I expected. I agree. I expected like a slow roll phase out, like a more of a trickle. And then it's not surprising now that the dust has settled though. So it feels really weird to be like, what crazy news? That makes sense.
So do you guys think it has anything to do with the poor reception to the end of Game of Thrones, or do you think it is as straightforward as they put it in their statement? They just couldn't spare the time with
I don't
Netflix?
think for a second it's because they couldn't fit it into a time. And like, it's tough because like I don't want to publicly celebrate two people losing a Star Wars franchise. That's a bummer for them personally. They'll be fine. They have a 9-figure Netflix deal. I'm not saying like, oh, these poor guys, now they have to settle for the 9-figure Netflix deal. And I don't want to just publicly celebrate it, but I don't for a second think that Disney was just like, yeah, it's fine that you don't have time to make a Star Wars trilogy. Disney does not mess around with Star Wars. At this point, I do think that there are an equal amount of people that have been removed from Star Wars movies than have actually made the Star Wars movies. Was it Trank? And
Josh
Trevorrow,
Trank, Colin Trevorrow, even Gareth Edwards to a degree.
And like technically George Lucas, who like handed in his outline for sequels, and they were like, no, that technically, he made them and then he didn't make them. But I just feel like Disney has a very clear way they want these Star Wars movies to be made, and they saw they saw what it would be like to have from the creators of Game of Thrones on a trailer that they just. I think they just cut their losses at this point. So
do you think it was creative differences too, in addition to from the creators of Game of Thrones? Or at least the Game of Thrones show? Yeah,
well, it's hard to say because the fact that they also have this Netflix deal, I just don't think that Disney liked the idea of sharing anything with a 9-figure Netflix deal. So it kind of, to me, if there was creative differences, it came from them like not focusing on this as much as they should have been.
I mean, that's a little bit of a scary thought, because also when we're talking about streaming services, and I think that some of this has worked in certain entities' benefit, them aligning themselves with specific creators and, giving out these gigantic 9-figure deals. So if any of Disney's motivation to part ways with them came from the fact that we don't want to share them, we could have a near future that resembles the past in terms of only certain people working with certain companies.
I don't love it.
That's it.
I don't like it. I don't think I'm just to state it plainly, I'm happy they're not making a Star Wars trilogy. I don't want to, again, I don't want to celebrate anyone maybe getting fired, but I'm very happy that David Benioff and Daniel Weiss are not making a Star Wars trilogy. But I also am worried about how often Disney just like cuts ties with people who they don't like the way they're making a Star Wars movie. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm very conflicted about how happy I should be publicly about two people losing a Star Wars movie.
I'm with you on the foundation of anyone losing a job that is a dream job. I don't want to ever celebrate anyone that's like, you've worked really hard, and whether you like their content or not, they've worked really hard to get to the point of having that content out there. Like whether or not, that interview notwithstanding, they've worked really hard. So it's really tricky to celebrate that. But at the same time, I didn't want to see two of the most aggressive fandoms in the world combine. I just didn't want to see the rage of Game of Thrones people and the rage of Star Wars people have a united front. So for me, this is a celebration of maybe Star Wars going more positively. I mean, this is a franchise about like finding peace and not leading towards the dark side, that like hate is a problem in the universe, that, you know, like certain, it's a very clear line in the sand, the Star Wars films. Like there is a very clear allegory to what they're talking about, and it's somehow been very missed by modern audiences, some modern audiences. So I didn't want them to have that, plus like, you know, the rape undercurrent. Like I don't need that much negativity in my content. I don't need this hyper aggressive, hyper masculine, hyper distorted view of one thing mixed with what a lot of Star Wars audience has put forward as their Star Wars. So I would love if the Star Wars fandom like takes a breather. I wouldn't mind a couple years off. I wouldn't mind if they focused on like, you know, the Mandalorian and like a lot more of the content that we know is coming. And like I love what Star Wars can be so much. I'd love to let it get back to being that.
I don't think Disney is ever going to let that happen. I think they carved out that release date, and also with where they have situated the Avatar movies.
Yeah.
I think they are purposely dominating the release calendar with their franchises, and they're not going to let that up. But I mean, that just brings up the next question I had for you guys, which is what's next? So you do think they're going to take a break, or do you think maybe, hey, the Kevin Feige movie that they just announced could fill this 2020 gap, or who knows? Maybe they'll put more urgency in Rian Johnson's projects.
I agree that the world in general could probably use a break from Star Wars movies. I think after Rise of Skywalker, it would be really nice if we went like 5-6 years without even touching a new trilogy. But like you said, they've carved out that space, and something is coming in 2022, and I don't think they're going to push forward with. I wish they'd push forward with the Rian Johnson trilogy.
I don't think they're going to.
This
doesn't change how I feel about that at all, which is weird.
No, not at all. I think that I don't want to speculate that he had anything to do with it, because that's going down dicey territory. But I do think this spot is wide open for this Kevin Feige Star Wars movie. Like I said, I don't want to be like, this was Kevin Feige's decision. He kicked them out because he secretly runs every branch of Disney, but it kind of feels like that.
I mean, it's just,
I don't want to not say that
it's
either.
The way it's timed. I mean, and again, a whole big batch of speculation here, but it's like these kinds of conversations, it's not like they just happened last night. These could have been happening for weeks, if not months. You know, maybe the Star Wars deal, I believe, came to them before the Netflix thing. So maybe they were already thinking something wasn't quite right, and then they line up the Kevin Feige one, and this is kind of just where the cards are falling right now. But
that's why I don't buy the scheduling thing for a second, because it's not like Disney didn't know that they were signing with Netflix. It's like it's not like these two companies. When these decisions are made, conversations happen. It's not like Benioff and Weiss called Disney and were like, by the way, we just signed this Netflix deal. Like,
they didn't call it their day job. It's not like, I got another job, can't make it to the office.
Sorry,
like, it's a 9-figure deal.
Traffic this morning, I can't make a Star Wars trilogy.
Sorry.
Both sides knew it was going on. It wasn't, last night, Kathleen Kennedy wasn't like, you know what, there's not enough time. There was a decision was made at some point, and I don't think that decision was made by Benioff and Weiss. But we were talking about this before we went on air. The language of these releases are like identical to any time someone leaves the Star Wars universe. It's like they have been a wonderful collaborator, and we hope to get them back in the galaxy far, far away someday in the future. And it's just like, well, you just fired them. That's what that means. And again, not the worst decision, but it is getting a little noticeable how many people are losing their Star Wars jobs.
Noticeable, and I would say alarming.
Yeah, there's a lot of what ifs now, because I really wanted to see the Lord and Miller Solo. I still want to see the Lord and Miller Solo movie. That's still like one of my dream films, and I don't know what this would have been. We knew so little about it, and the fact that it was about to get made and we still knew so little about it. Now I'm wondering how much of it was like the usual Star Wars secrecy, and how much of it was, you know, the amount of problems they were having creatively behind closed doors.
I think if I chose like a specific angle to believe on this, when it comes to Lord and Miller, I think that's, you know, a hesitant approach to the creative side of all of this, where they were afraid to go down a really unique path. Whereas this, to me, feels like big companies needing to gobble up people and say, these are mine and you can't have them. So they don't necessarily fuel the same Star Wars concerns, but overall, the fact that everything feels so unstable, and yes, Star Wars Episode 9 Rise of Skywalker could correct it, but right now, I was kind of looking forward to having like a little bit of a firm roadmap, especially with a release date so far in the future, to know that they're taking the time to develop these properly. And now all of a sudden it's like everything was blown up in my face and I don't know what to make of the franchise.
And I also, this to me almost, I think the biggest culprit, it seems like, was a reputation thing. Benioff and Weiss were damaged goods by the time Game of Thrones, which is such a really mean way to refer to two people. But this thread that was going around about their comments about getting hired on Game of Thrones and how they were just sort of like, yeah, we didn't know what we were doing, and we just came in and we don't know why George R. R. Martin gave us this material, and we wanted to strip Game of Thrones of its fantasy elements because we wanted to appeal to football players, and it was just all these weird things. The fact that had reached that thread, that those comments had reached like a peak the day before they announced this is, again, none of this is official. This is not the official word. This is not what was reported. But it come on, that's what happened. Their names have become something toxic, and Disney does not mess around with the reputation of their two big friends of Marvel and Star Wars. They don't. It's just, I'm not supporting it. It scares me that Disney owns everything, but the truth of the matter is that they don't mess around when it comes to the reputation of their franchises.
I personally, with the Game of Thrones run we had leading up to this point, it's been nothing but bad press for them. And with the Comic-Con thing where they didn't come, I really would love to have what feels like a full-fledged support from everyone at Disney behind Star Wars. So for me, I don't want to have it where it's like there's the team Rian Johnson people and the team JJ people. I'm so sick of the rivalry among Star Wars fans. Like if you love a fandom, it's really exhausting when there's the Bloods and Crips thing going on within it. So I would love to have the new trilogy or anyone that's representing Star Wars be a united front behind them. So I from a PR standpoint, I see what you're saying, but I also would love if when they make an announcement, it's like, oh, that makes sense. That's perfect.
Because who is that announcement in your mind? Because right now,
we talked about it before Jon Favreau.
Yeah, Jon Favreau. Especially.
That's the bummer thing.
I do have high hopes for Mandalorian. If Mandalorian comes out and it becomes,
that's the funny thing. I think the conversation on the Mandalorian was like so positive, and then they released this new trailer, and it was like, I'm really excited for the future of Star Wars. And then like 2 hours later, they're like, oh,
I think it's a doomed attempt to bury the story. That's with the release time of the information, and also with trying to take attention away with look at this cool thing, so you don't pay attention to this bummer of a thing.
I think like a really big prestige director for like a single Star Wars, or Jon Favreau for like a trilogy, or like if they announce like something with David Fincher or someone that's like, how the hell did that happen? Like that would be on all fronts, like everyone's in, or someone that's really safe, like Jon Favreau, who hasn't done anything wrong.
I think David Fincher would probably get fired from Star
Wars. That's what I'm saying. It's like one person.
Well, that's kind of the bummer thing is everyone's like, well, who do you think should take over? And I have all these ideas, and I'm like, but that person would probably get fired too. Like anyone that I could think of, I don't know, like what's a Guillermo del Toro Star Wars movie look like? What's like a Boots Riley Star Wars movie look like? Like exactly, these are all such cool ideas. And as soon as they're like, hey, I have this wacky idea, that they'd be like, you're fired. Bring in Ron Howard. Get Ron Howard off of ice. Like it's
I feel
just
like the only people that they could bring in that I would truly believe would stay are folks who have already done that within Disney, which is limited to Jon Favreau, Kevin Feige. Who even knows if the Russo brothers could jump from one major... I'm not saying that they're going to do that or even that I want that to happen, but they're two individuals that have had such a long-standing relationship with Disney and with Marvel that if they were brought in, I would believe it would stick.
And when they gave it to a David Fincher type, it was Rian Johnson who had such a polarizing film. And
what's so funny is Rian Johnson also ran like the most drama-free production. Like you never heard anything. And they were like, by the way, Star Wars Episode 8 is wrapped. It's done. Everyone had a great time, and everyone was like, nice, that's awesome. That'll be a nice drama-free time. Movie came out, split the fandom in half.
Well, it was a tiny bit of drama right before with Mark Hamill, and then it went away because everybody's like, no, actually, I agree. And so it was like this blip of drama, and then by like post-production was the opposite. It was suddenly like, this movie.
But he also went away and he was like, okay, that was fun to make a Star Wars, and went away, made his own movie, and now it's like, oh, I'm also working on my own trilogy. It's just like a very quiet, drama-free production thing, and his movie is the one that sort of blew up the fandom. And it's just funny how there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes in the Star Wars world, apparently, and Rian Johnson is just like very quietly working on his own stuff, just trying to do his best as Rian Johnson does.
I would ask for predictions on what's going to happen next.
Predictions?
I don't even... I don't know what to make of any of this. I don't think we're going to hear a single thing until well after The Mandalorian hits. The Mandalorian hits, let's say the reviews are like sky high, this is the greatest thing ever created. Then all of a sudden, I think they're going to open the door to a bigger role for Jon Favreau in Star Wars across the board. Disney Plus, feature films going forward.
I think they should give it to Filoni. I think they should do, and honestly, bring in both Favreau and I mean in terms of like the people who have directed Star Wars before, those two names are extremely boring because it's just been white dudes directing a Star Wars forever. But if they're gonna go the safe route, which they are, because they're coming off of firing two people at 9:00 at night on a Monday, they're gonna bring in a Ron Howard-ish choice, and I think if they must do that, Favreau and Filoni are the best people for the job.
I think I would be most excited about that if they announced them as a team, like an equal team going into this together.
And maybe even a third name for a trilogy. Like I'd like to give the first one to Favreau, Filoni, and
I want to see a war movie with Star Wars. Like I want to see Catherine Bigelow. Like I want to see I want to see a movie that we've experienced recently as like that peak war experience of negativity, because the moments in Solo I liked most were the ones where I was like, oh right, Star Wars has war in it, and we haven't really seen that in a while for me. So I'd love to see something different, but again, that's how you get fired.
we'd all love to see something different. Like I remember when they announced Rogue One and they were like, it's a heist movie set in the Star Wars universe, and I was like, that sounds amazing, and then it was only like kind of that. Like I feel like they announced these amazing premises and then it's just sort of stripped down until it's just a Star Wars movie, which is still great. I'm like, yes, like lightsabers are the coolest, but like I'd love to see something within the Star Wars universe that didn't just feel like another Star Wars movie, which is a strange thing to say. Like I don't know how to describe it because we haven't gotten it yet.
Well, it's the challenge of any franchise continuing. You want it to hold tight to the pillars that made it special to begin with, but you can't keep getting, no matter how much you love it, you can't keep getting the same thing over and over again. You have to make it new and fresh. And I think when it comes to a company like Disney in particular, with their franchises continuing, they never have the nerve to take that big of a step away from how all of these franchises that they own have started, and I think that's been to their detriment at this point.
I think Disney should look to what DC's doing with like they're branching out and they're making such different films that all are under an umbrella, but they're so different. Like Pixar movies all feel like Pixar, even though there couldn't be more different. And I think DC movies are starting to do the same, where it's just so many risks and bold choices, but you know your audience is coming. Like Joker is now the biggest R-rated of all time because it starred the Joker, but it also is a movie.
I said it yesterday, lower your budgets and take bigger risks.
I would love that.
I think the payoff is going to be much bigger that way.
I'd love to see $10, $35 million Star Wars movies than a next $350 million Star Wars movie.
Like people are going to come to a Star Wars movie. Like it's almost like we had a really great piece by Adam Chitwood on the website that was like, we don't need another trailer for Rise of Skywalker because it's a Star Wars movie. Like it's an event when a Star Wars movie comes out. So to not take a chance because you're like, what if people don't come to our Star Wars movie is absurd. And there's all these reports of Warner Brothers being worried about Joker. They're like, the Joker's not going to make money because it's an R-rated movie. Now it's making so much money, and it's not even a surprise.
The article saying like it was like this giant risk for Warner Brothers kept making me laugh. I'm like, guys, that's Batman's nemesis. He's going to be just fine. This was a crafty budget. It's going to be made back the first weekend. And then it was. And I think that Disney's really smart with their marketing. And I think a part of this conversation keeps coming back to all that negative press that was going around. But I think that no matter what, Disney's got a very strong stronghold in everything. So now is the time to take risks. But will that happen?
The Game of Thrones was still by far the highest rated thing HBO has ever done. And that last season was bad. Really bad. I think at the end of the day, we can't deny that the last season of Game of Thrones was very bad, and that it's still Game of Thrones though. Like you can't take away the fact that it was the biggest thing on TV for years.
That's actually a perfect example of like the Star Wars thing. Like that everyone was like, I'm not enjoying this. And they'd come back week to week to week.
Exactly,
and the numbers would improve and improve because it's still the event. Yeah. So I think it is okay to take risks, but will we?
All right, guys, from one touchy topic on to the next. Story number 2 today. So you might actually remember this conversation a little that I had with Coy and Jabby on the show once about playback speed, and how Jabby in particular, he really wanted the option to watch content at a faster rate than intended. Apparently, Netflix is testing just that. And that's usually the first step for them actually to make this tool useful across the board on its platform. Wildly alarming, in my opinion, and the same goes for Judd Apatow as well. He took to Twitter and was super heated about all this. He writes, "No, Netflix, no. Don't make me have to call every director and show creator on earth to fight you on this. Save me the time. I will win, but it will take a ton of time. Don't F with our timing. We give you nice things. Leave them as they were intended to be seen." He continued, "Distributors don't get to change the way the content is presented. Doing so is a breaking of trust and won't be tolerated by the people who provide it. Let the people who don't care put it in their contracts that they don't care. Most all do." Do I dare ask what you guys make of this possibility in Netflix's future? Because it is extremely alarming to me.
Yeah, it's a hard pass for me. I don't understand. I don't understand it. Like I know people who listen to like audiobooks on 1.5 speed, and I don't understand that either. To me it's very strange to want to like consume the content as quickly as possible. Like I said this before, and it's a little dramatic, but it almost feels like dystopian that we're like, I gotta upload the content into my brain as quickly as possible. And it's like, why is that how you need to consume art? Like how I don't understand. Even Netflix stuff, which a lot of it isn't high art. Why do you need to get it into your head as quickly as possible?
In attempt to understand this, you bring up audiobooks. I do listen to them faster than the regular speed. Part of the reason I do that is because you guys all know I listen to these audiobooks while I run, and they are read at a very deliberate pace, as they should be, to make sure you get every single word and every single pause in between. And when I run, I need it coming at me a little faster to keep me going. Yeah. So I'm just having a hard time justifying that stance on audiobooks, but also saying it's inappropriate, because truly audiobooks, I know a lot of people out there don't think that's really reading, but I think there's a real performance quality to it for the narrators over there. There is high production value now across the board when it comes to audiobooks. So maybe it is wrong of me to do that and to ruin someone's performance that way. But for some reason, I feel more strongly about when it is a TV show or a movie, and you have, the pacing of someone's editing, the pacing of someone's performance, the director's original tensions, basically all going out the window at a touch of a button.
For me, this comes down to two things, both very personal. One, pan and scan is sacrilege. I remember when they used to reformat VHSs and they'd like mess with the widescreen by just chopping off the sides and zooming in, or they'd pan and scan. This is that with timing. This is that with speed. This is sacrificing the integrity of the art. It's when you listen to a remix, you know it's a remix, and that's okay if that's your intended goal. But when you're watching something that's so crafted by 100 or 1,000 people, you shouldn't just go like, no. And to me, that just feels wrong. And the other is people complain that I talk too fast, and they're like, I listen to everyone else in 1.5 speed, but when I listen to Coy, I have to slow it down to regular speed. Like, I've never understood my talking fast affecting others negatively if they're listening to everyone else at 1.5 speed. So it feels like if this is the intended pace that I experience the world at, this is how I'm delivering my information. So it's how these people are intending their things to come out.
Especially with, I feel like this is why Judd Apatow in particular is so mad, especially with comedy.
Comedy's all about timing.
Timing is everything. So when they're rushing through a scene and
horror, suspense, comedy.
Yeah, you're just getting hit with jokes or horror too. You're just running through a tense scene and you're like, I need to watch this tension as quickly as possible.
Very quickly. Exactly. I got to run through this room really fast.
Well, it kills the value of certain scares too. And I think that's something many undervalue while they're even making a movie is the need to have, a very slow pace and a slow build to a scare, and also the importance of inserts. So many people don't even bother to get insert shots because it's like, why do I need that door creaking open or the teeny tiny doorknob? But like, you need that stuff. And I feel like if you don't have an understanding of that and you're blowing through it, you're just completely wasting the value of every teeny tiny decision that adds to a big emotional or scare payoff.
But to play complete devil's advocate, and I'm saying like I completely disagree with this decision, the speaking fast thing, I do tell people straight up, like, listen at 0.75 speed if you don't understand me, because that's on you. Like, when I listen to people talk and they speak slowly, I lose my mind because people bore me. So if something bores you and like you're watching Netflix, like maybe that is a time for that. But it's still, don't consider that the way you're meant to receive it. Don't consider that the
I think if something bores you, you could just watch something
There's
else.
a lot of content. guys.
I don't know. That's the thing. Like, why? I think the argument is like, well, Netflix stuff isn't that good. I could just watch as quickly as possible. I'm like, or you could just watch something else. Like, you don't have to watch all the content. The only benefit I personally see to it is the fact that I sometimes procrastinate and I have like a deadline the next day. Like, for like content creators, I'm like, oh, maybe I could see the benefit, but I'm genuinely curious, and I'm sure there are people out there who disagree with us. I'm genuinely curious what they think the benefit is, because to me, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
It just hurts the
One
content.
possible benefit could be, let's say season 3 of a show is coming up and you want to be able to jump in, but you don't have time to watch seasons 1 and 2. If you watch it at a faster pace, it's a lower time commitment.
That's totally true. But it's weird to me that we've turned like watching TV into like a competitive sport, and you're like, oh no, I'm not caught up.
It's a good way to describe it. It really does feel that way. I try not to treat it like that too, but there are so many times where someone will tell me the show is so great, and like I have such like deep FOMO and like envy that I don't have the free time to watch that. It really eats away at me.
But to me it just feels like going to like a restaurant, not even a very nice restaurant, but a restaurant where a lot of people put a lot of effort into that food, and you just shove it in your face like immediately, and it's like, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I agree. This is like turning Netflix an all-you-can-eat buffet, which it has been, but this is the next step towards it being to like on a cruise ship.
Shoving your face into the buffet.
Like now it's like we didn't really reheat it well. Like
exactly.
now it's just like getting in the calories, and you're not actually eating the food, and that's a problem.
The content is not sustaining you. You don't need to watch all the Netflix to live your life.
And I do think completionism with content is a problem I used to have, and I've been working on it. Like I've been chipping away at like everybody's saying the show's good. I'm like, I just don't have time.
I'll never watch it.
I can't watch every single Berlanti show anymore. Like I host Collider Heroes, and I'm like, you have 19 comic book shows. I just can't.
If you saw the list of must-watch things I have, it's embarrassing.
Must-watch, it means I'll never watch it.
To bring the audiobook thing back into the equation, though, so what I'm thinking right now is the difference is the way that the original source material was intended to be ingested. And when it comes to a book, yes, you're getting the author's words, but it's also on you to read at the pace that you want to read, which is why it would make more sense maybe to speed up an audiobook to match your personal pace, because reading a book, it's all about imagination and feel and what you bring to it too, in addition to what the author gives you.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're watching a TV show or movie that has an individual's creative touch from like the top down to, the director, a PA, or a props person that had a certain influence on a little thing. It's like all of that was intended to be viewed a certain way. I mean, look at all the conversations we have too on, watching something at home versus on the big screen, watching something with the right projection, the right sound, making sure the theater is pitch black and no one's like using a phone there's so many factors that go into making sure that you are getting the director's vision and what they intend. And, bringing up what we were talking about before about aligning with certain filmmakers, if this is something that Netflix does, like, could you imagine Martin Scorsese being like, okay, put double speed on The
Imagine telling
Irishman.
that man you watched The Irishman at 1.5 speed.
This could
you would
hurt
watch
them.
Martin Scorsese's head explode off of his shoulders.
I mean, I wonder how realistic it is what Judd Apatow says, put it in your contract, because you're not going to make deals with folks like Martin Scorsese if viewers have the option to watch the movie a way you didn't intend for it to be watched.
We're living at this new frontier of streaming while movie theaters are having a hard time keeping up. So everyone's been talking about simultaneously, we're in streaming wars, and we're also having the Marty Scorsese's, the Francis Ford Coppola's, the Ed Nortons coming out and having their statements about what cinema is the death of and why cinema's dying. And I agree with Ed Norton, I think, the most. Like, the cinema experience of sitting through 100 trailers, having the projector not be right, having it not be actually, like, the peak performance of a movie, that's what you go to the theater for, is peak performance of a movie. Like, you're there to be in the film out as it was intended. If streaming starts to do worse than that, Like, I get mad when the projector's not bright enough, the sound's not right. If they suddenly take away my right to pacing, or like they're not going to tell me I have to watch at 1.5 speed. But
everything is at 1.5 speed.
I only can. But if other people are watching it that way and they're not experiencing it, like if you watch Breaking Bad at 1.5 times speed, and I have a conversation with you about like the tension, we're going to have a different experience. We watch different shows.
Yeah, that's
that's what I mean
thing.
about the movie theater. Like if someone watched Ad Astra and the lumens was down like to 20%, they would have seen a different movie than I saw.
And Netflix is not just Netflix. All streaming is already taking away the connectivity, the community of watching TV. I really do feel like Game of Thrones is one of the last things we're gonna watch together. The fact that
Watchmen is, I'm hoping.
Yeah, well, I wish.
Hoping not that it ends, but hoping that Watchmen brings the Game of Thronesers back.
But it's almost like if we change the way we even watch Netflix, there's just going to be no way to discuss a TV show. Like you said,
It's a different movie,
we're all going to be watching different things.
Rather than do this, I still go back to the idea that all these streaming platforms need to find a new tool to add to increase the connectivity. So it's like, by not having weekly event viewing, they've taken away the feel that we got from something like Game of Thrones. But why not get creative? Put your heads together, use those deep pockets to create a tool that recreates that for your products in a new way.
I know a lot of editors that could use some work, and you chop up 12 hours into a 1 hour recap instead of having you watch it at twice the speed. Like make a recap video that is actually authentically a movie, and then you dive in, and then that's giving people work, and you're not sacrificing it as much.
I guess it is important to also note that Netflix did release a statement, and they were like, everyone relax, we're just testing it. That doesn't mean we're definitely going to do it. And as we learned from Benioff and Weiss, companies do listen to feedback. They do respond to what the people are saying. And I, just on a personal level, I've only seen negative feedback to this. And if it's just a resounding pass from everyone, I could see Netflix being like, all right, sorry.
Like Princess Bride 2.
So you do think that this is not going to go through?
If it is, it's not going to be something we see for a while. It'll be something that'll be fine-tuned into something you barely notice. Because, again, this is just from personal experience. I've only seen people being like, why would you do that? Don't do that.
So none of us really know all that much about how Netflix gets views.
Good night, everyone.
So now it's making me think, by offering double time, I mean, does that just give them license to up their numbers? Because isn't the rule that they have to watch something like 70% of a movie in order for it to count?
Yeah, their numbers. Well, we don't know. Like you said, we don't know anything about their numbers, and the stuff they have said is wonky at best. It's like this many people have watched it, but what that means is this many people sort of like passed by it on the kids. This is very confusing, and this will make it even more confusing because it's like someone sped through a season. Did they really watch it? Their ratings are already impossible to decipher, and this will make them harder to decipher. And I don't think that's good for a network where we don't know anything about the way they renew and cancel TV shows.
I've always wanted to see the Alvin and the Chipmunks squeakquel cut of Citizen Kane, so now I have my dream realized. Here I am. Like, it won't be
that's the thing. If they do 1.5 speed, it's like, are they going to keep cranking it up? Can you just blow through The Irishman in like 20 minutes and be like, I watched The Irishman?
We're so close to both WALL-E and Clockwork Orange style just dystopian eye-peeled futures. Like, we're right
to
there.
me, it reminded me of like The Matrix, where he just like uploaded Kung Fu into his brain. He's just like, you're going to sit there and just be like, all right, I watched The Irishman.
As much as I want all content all the time, I don't want that version of it. All right, we're going to continue covering this story as it develops over at Netflix. But right now, we got to tell you about a very, very cool piece of content that you get to watch. Hey, maybe Coy is in this, and Coy always does a great job with comic book shopping. Here's a promo.
I'm Coy Jandreau, this is Comic Book Shopping, and I'm here with Damon Lindelof. How you doing, man?
I'm fantastic, thanks for having me.
This show is canceled! Maybe not the polar bears.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that I get to do this for a living is incredible. Joking. Oh my God, what?
The John Carpenter. We are doing some comic book shopping in honor of Watchmen, which I am dying to dive into. I am so excited, but first we should buy some comics.
Oh, we absolutely should.
We're at Golden Apple, are you ready?
Let's do it, let's take a bite.
Let's do it!
You do not want to miss the full episode of that show, guys. Trust me. It's great. All right. But I hate this transition. We have to move on to a not so great story.
Something positive.
Some more unpleasant news.
It is well worth discussing, though, because it is another form of content manipulation in a sense. A bunch of people who flew on Delta recently realized that some of the content has been removed from the movie Booksmart, and it pertains to the queer identity in the movie that Caitlin Dever's character's arc experiences very heavily. It's a major part of the movie, and it's super important, and it wasn't in it. And we've got a whole bunch of quotes from the folks involved in the movie. Olivia Wilde told Variety, "There's insane violence of bodies being smashed in half, and yet a love scene between two women is censored from the film. It's such an integral part of this character's journey. I don't understand it. My heart just broke. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. I want people to experience the entire film." Caitlin Dever chimed in, "I don't even know what to say to that. That makes me so mad." And then Beanie Feldstein wrote, "We're on the case to get this rectified. Our movie is a beautiful representation of the queer experience as young people. I'm a queer person, so we're getting to the bottom of it. Don't worry. If you can watch me and Skylar kiss, you can watch Diana and Caitlin kiss." So you guys see this report. I don't know. I think I kind of shared Caitlin Dever's response where I don't even know what to make of it, especially when you think of the fact that someone watched this movie and made this decision that, like Beanie Feldstein said, she could kiss Skylar Gazondo, but Diana Silvers and Caitlin Dever can't in plain viewing. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's weird because I know that plain censorship is aggressive. I've watched some chopped and screwed movies on a plane. I watched the new Hellboy on a plane.
The Netflix
it was
cut.
25 minutes long. Yeah, exactly. But that's on some level understandable. If I'm sitting next to a kid, the kid looks over and someone's getting their head chopped off. You're like, all right, that's bad. But to censor something that doesn't need to be censored, then it becomes an opinion of the person censoring it, and that is terrifying. It's terrifying for someone to watch that movie and be like, any queer storyline can't be in it because that's not appropriate. That's not understandable. That's someone making a decision that something is wrong that isn't wrong, and that to me is there's no good. I was gonna say that's the wrong kind of censorship. There's no good kind of censorship, but to me that's scarier than if it was just edited.
One of the things that scares me most about the future of this country is that violence is so encouraged, and being open with your sexuality and being open with love, hate being encouraged and love being discouraged will always bother me. And that we live in a society where love is not something you do in public, but hate is something you celebrate. And that's so much of the problem with our content, with our news, with the way we're raising kids. And this is the embodiment of that. So for me, love, especially in Booksmart, which is such a nuanced, slow burn, you feel these characters fall in love. You feel them discover things. You feel this character learn she feels the way she does. So that is an integral part of the movie. To take that away in 2019 is just gross. This reads like something you'd hear about in another country and go wow, I'm glad I don't live there. No, it's here. So I personally, I saw this developing on Twitter, and I thought it was someone trying to get Olivia Wilde's attention. I thought it was I was on a plane and this happened. And I was like, oh, they just want to talk to Olivia Wilde. And I thought it was, and then it was real. And I was like, there's no way a major airline did this in 2019. And it's so despicable that we can have someone get bloodied up and eviscerated and maimed, or even movies that are completely uncut and there's just actual visceral sex happening on the row in front of you, but girls kissing is a problem. It's I don't understand the thought process, and I hope I never understand the thought process.
Also, the arc just doesn't make sense for that.
Yeah, the movie doesn't make sense. There's no movie.
The movie would end, you'd be like, well, what happened?
It's watching one chunk of Groundhog's Day.
Yeah, exactly. It's just that.
Especially with a scene towards the end. It's where does that come from then?
The credits just roll, and you're like, I guess that. All right,
I don't know.
That is.
I would really love to see just a list of things that airlines must take out of their. It's the last thing I watched where something was noticeably taken out was I was watching Almost Famous, and the plane scene was taken out, and I know that's a thing that if there's a plane crash or the threat of a plane crash, they'll take that out, I guess. But
sometimes you're watching a movie and you're like. And you put your hands I've been on planes and been like, oh no.
Oh yeah, sometimes they're just oh, this isn't censored at all.
Oh, yeah. And it's how was that decision made? We're oh, I'm so sorry.
But to me, it's it's scary. I don't want to make too much of a thing of it because it's something that will obviously be addressed and because it's been noticed now. But to me, it's scary that that's something that a major company thought no one would notice was taken out of a movie because that like I said, that's them policing what they think is right and wrong when it comes to sexuality. You're not trying to protect anyone from anything that should be protected from at all, and that is objectively wrong.
I watched the entirety of that Amanda Seyfried, where she played the porn star.
I covered that movie.
Yeah, I watched the entirety of that movie on a plane because I wasn't thinking.
I know that movie.
And it wasn't censored. And I remember watching it and being like, what have I done? And I was enjoying the movie, so I didn't want to stop. But I was also like in that really uncomfortable, like when you're watching American Pie with your parents. Like I was in that like, oh, what have I done? So it became this really weird like flight, but that was about porn. Yeah. And I watched it in its entirety.
You made that choice to watch the porn movie on the airplane.
I accidentally watched that narrative porn on film.
I'm trying so hard to remember the title of that movie without looking it up. But
it was about Deep Throat, right?
All I can think about right now is the Amanda Seyfried Julianne Moore movie. Chloe, is that the Adam McGoyan movie?
It's a different movie.
You know, that's a completely different movie. But this one had Chris Noth in it, right?
Yeah, I believe so. But yeah, this movie, and that was on a plane uncensored.
Right,
so those parallels, like that's a scary that you can have a movie about porn and be somewhat pornographic in its nature.
It all makes absolutely no sense. I think the one silver lining I find in this situation is that we have filmmakers like Olivia Wilde, Caitlin Dever, and Beanie Feldstein out there who aren't just going to like roll over and let it happen. They're standing up for the thing that they care so much about. I mean, in particular, Booksmart. So I love Booksmart all on its own, but one of the things that really kind of caught on with me this year is just how passionate they were about the film and how you could feel the love that the cast had for each other radiate. I actually think that truly makes it an even better movie, but the fact that they are willing to, stand by their movie and make sure that this is an issue that gets addressed. I think that is super important because who knows how many other times this has probably happened out there and we haven't even heard of it. And I think that's one of the most disturbing elements about this. I have to look up the title of the movie before my head explodes.
And that is the positivity of Twitter, that there are good things like bringing notice to things that should be discussed as opposed to all the negativity of Twitter.
I don't think this would have even been an issue if we didn't have a way to like bring it directly to Olivia Wilde. And
Lovelace.
Lovelace.
Okay.
It was about
the perfect plane movie.
Yes, sometimes you watch Lovelace on a plane because you're half asleep and oh no.
Yeah. I was about to say don't watch Lovelace on a plane, watch Booksmart, but I don't want you to watch it like this. So seriously, I cannot recommend Booksmart enough. Go find any platform, whether it's DVD, Blu-ray, any, streaming service, buy it on iTunes. I don't care. Not to be missed movie of 2019. All right, let's get.
Just don't watch it on a Delta Airlines flight. Watch it anywhere. I'm
very curious. I'm flying JetBlue this week, and if I go on that plane and that movie is on there, I will watch it just because now I'm curious to see if it changes from airline to airline.
I would be. I would love to know what the standards are across the various airlines because like we've said, I've watched movies that were barely a movie, and I've watched movies where I was like, oh, they cut nothing, and
it's really weird.
This poor child. It's just like I'd love to know what, and then working that in, I'd love to know how they got to the point where they're like, we can't show two women kissing on a plane.
Crazy. It's a nonsense story there. I don't like it. And you know what? I wish. In order to end this episode on a high note, there's no other better place to turn to than cats. And did you guys know it's National Cat Day? Thanks for letting us know, Alex Dom, who also wants to know what is your pick for the best movie cat? Mine is Puss in Boots.
The best movie cat? It will be Taylor Swift in the December 20th, 2019 film.
It's either going to be Taylor Swift or Judi Dench cat. I don't know which one.
Or Idris Elba's spooky villain cat. Honestly, it will be the cast of Cats. The only film I would support watching at 1.5 times speed because that would be hilarious.
I will say Binks and Hocus Pocus. I keep saying
that synergy.
I keep
that
saying
Collider
it now.
Synergy.
I have not stopped doing it though since we started Hocus Pocus. It's incredible. That last I'm not even just saying this to promote it, but that last episode of Hocus Pocus with Beck Bennett was like really good. The other one that I wanted to say was, and this, we're not reviewing the movie yet, but there's a cat in Dr. Sleep that gets a big thumbs up in my book.
Sally Field and Homeward Bound is incredible.
I love that movie.
The Cat and the Crow is slept on. That cat's great. That cat does a lot of some nuanced work. And Garfield by Bill Murray. No, the first two. Just those first two.
Mike Myers in the live action Cat
yeah.
in the Hat movie. Terrifying.
The bald cat in Austin Powers.
The bald cat. Pretty much. Has there ever been a bad movie cat? Like, can you name it one where you're like, I wish this cat wasn't in this movie?
What's a CG live action hybrid movie? I'm sure there's a bad cat in one of those.
The Lion King. The entirety of the new Lion King.
That was all CGI. There was only one live action frame.
I did not enjoy those cats.
There's
those cats
some movie out there where a cat is like actually talking, but also given like human like facial.
Did Kevin Spacey do one of those?
Didn't
Kevin Spacey just do like a cat?
Yeah.
No, that's
like,
not
that's
the
the cat.
That's the bad
Nine
cat.
Lives, and that's a movie that is so ridiculous. It's
but
kind
it's
of fun to
voiced by
watch.
Kevin Spacey.
Have a beer and put on 9 Lives. I
Watch it on
swear.
a plane.
Or we watched it on a plane.
Maybe watch it on a plane.
The perfect plane movie.
That movie is.
We've suddenly pitched a lot of good
something
drinking
else.
movies and movies that would work on Netflix. We've negated
a
our
lot
entire
of overlap between movies heavily featuring cats and movies that you should watch very drunk.
You know, a shockingly good drinking movie. I think Cats will be one, but Les Mis, great drinking movie.
Yeah, because you get all riled up.
Yeah, you're like feeling it.
You take to the streets.
Every time they sing a number or like sing themselves to death, drink and solid. Anytime the crow lands, when Russell Crowe appears suddenly, it's
I was about to say we've ended this on a positive note, but that's a questionable one.
Right back to death in the
You do
streets.
you,
Very
Craig.
positive.
Guys, thank you so much for spending your Tuesday morning here on Movie Talk. No, Adam, feel better. Please feel better. And Cody in the booth, thank you so much for stepping in today. Dorian in the live chat, thank you for your help. As always, guys, do not leave this episode of Movie Talk without liking and sharing. And after you leave this episode, don't go anywhere else but Collider Live. They kick off at 9 a.m. Pacific and then come right back here tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. PT. We have a brand new episode of Movie Talk, and we have a really, really cool guest for you tomorrow. If you're a fan of Vsauce content, you're not going to want to miss it. See you tomorrow morning.